Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I have very, very, very exciting news. It's about the Oregon game kickoff time. Unless you have anything else you want to talk about or don't want to talk about today.
Well, there's certainly something we don't want to talk about, but we have to, and that came down on Thursday afternoon after Ohio State announced findings from an independent investigation regarding an independent massage therapist in Northeast Ohio who had essentially been targeting and exploiting Ohio State football players since I guess around 2018 is when this first started happening. First report of it was made by Ohio State or from somebody, a report of what she was doing. The 41-year-old massage therapist report of what she was doing was made to the Ohio Medical Board in March of 2020. A year went by and the medical board let the Ohio State Police Department know about it. I'm going to assume that year went by because that was the pandemic.
The medical board may have been busy last year with other stuff, arguably.
Yeah. So, and basically what this was is she would reach out to all kinds of players on social media, be it Instagram or Twitter, whatever, in the DMs, and say, I'm a massage therapist, and I guess she would offer free massages, and players would try to pay her, and sometimes she would take the money. I guess sometimes she wouldn't, but these things would also escalate into, she would send them risque photos, and sometimes during the massages, things would go a little too far, and she would put her hands where they didn't need to be, and players would tell her no, and so she would back off. But not all players told her no, and then sometimes after a massage, she would, with that had some sexual activity to it, she would then ask for money, but nothing happened. Nothing would progress there as well. Tom, just a really tough thing to talk about in terms of what we normally do on this show, but it is a mirror into society of what the players have to deal with, and something that Ohio State has been warning them about. Not this specifically, but they're always telling the players to be careful of people trying to take advantage of you.
Right. And, I think there's a lot of people who want to be closer to get to know Ohio State football players in some way or another. And, the compliance department generally will warn them about all the different things. And, there's no such thing as a free lunch and all of that. And so they have to be mindful of that. To me, the most interesting part of this story, because, you start reading this report and it's like, oh, where is this going? And then it was kind of like, okay, this will have no impact on the eligibility of any current players, as far as we can tell. There's not an institutional issue here. From Ohio State's point of view, I think it's more or less, in terms of like direct impact to the football program, I think this is coming to kind of like a nothing. And, but I think the more interesting part of this is you contrast this with some of the stuff that came out this week about Michigan's handling of Dr. Anderson, who was their football team doctor in the 1980s. And Ohio State obviously had kind of a similar situation with Richard Strauss. So this is not just a one institution issue. Penn State had Jerry Sandusky. Like, this is Michigan State had Larry Nassar. Like, this is kind of happening all over the place. And it was allowed to go unchecked for years and years and years and years and years. And, hundreds or thousands of people were victimized in some of these cases. It's interesting to me that this was taken so seriously, and Ohio State obviously is doing their best to let you know they're taking it seriously, and they're making sure this is being addressed and dealt with. And it's obviously not a one-to-one comparison, because this is not an Ohio State employee, as it was in the case of Anderson or Strauss or Nassar or Sandusky. And it's not a doctor, and you can have conversations about the power dynamics involved in these interactions and all of that. But it was very interesting to me that Ohio State is being very, very proactive here and trying to get ahead of this, make sure that like all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and everyone knows and everyone's kind of on the same page with all this. That I think that's probably a reflection not necessarily of the differences between those cases and this one, but more of, hopefully institutions have learned their lesson about, like, if something is happening that should not be happening, you need to get it, you need to get ahead of it. You need to make sure you're real, aware of what's going on. Everyone knows what's going on. The thing is handled, and it's handled kind of efficiently and effectively, and out in the open to the degree that it could be. I mean, obviously, this whole investigation happened basically without anyone knowing. So this was, you investigate it, quietly, and then you publicly release your findings. I mean, that seems like if that's the takeaway from the Anderson and the Strauss and the Nassar kind of cases, like, great. That's how this should probably be working.
Well, and a handful of media members talked with Gene Smith today, and the era of secrecy, or what concerned him, I guess, in like releasing this information. You found like nobody got in trouble, no laws were essentially broken, other than like the medical board and what the therapist has to deal with in terms of losing her license, but like no criminal activity. And so one of the things that Gene Smith was concerned about is players, I guess, kind of being embarrassed that this is going to be released. And so that was a concern. But he said he wanted this out there for other universities and other programs to just use this as an example in terms of like just a cautionary tale, if you will, and that these things happen, look out for them. This is how we handled it. And even though I didn't get to write it in the story that I wrote up because we were up against a deadline on it, the findings from the law firm Barnes and Thornburg, who did the independent investigation, they applauded how transparent Ohio State was. How active they were in terms of always talking to their players about stuff like this, and the players have had training on compliance, and that assistant coaches were constantly talking to their players about things like this. So it's not one of those things where it's like a lack of institutional control. There's plenty of institutional control, but this stuff happens off campus, and it's coaches were not aware of it. As soon as Ohio State found out about it, they let the NCAA know, and the NCAA was right along with them, finding out everything there, finding out no extra benefits, no violations. And I guess from talking to Gene Smith, I don't want to quote him on this, but it seemed like the reason there weren't extra benefits was because the biggest beneficiary was the massage therapist, because she was doing this for her own need and gratification. So I think that was one of the reasons why, a few free massages here or there didn't really register, because almost like the players themselves are being taken advantage of, were certainly some of the victims in this. And so I'm guessing the NCAA probably isn't keen on punishing victims.
Well, and this is one of these things where, like, you're not talking about someone getting a helicopter for free or something, or a big beach house. It's like, okay, this to me rises to the level of guys getting free drinks at a club or something like that, or guys getting a free sandwich at lunch. Like, yeah, okay. I mean, this is not anything that this is the kind of thing that 10, 15 years ago would have been, scandalized everyone if they had decided that this was, some kind of an improper benefit. At this point, like, all of this stuff is coming, like the NIL stuff is coming, that it's this is all going to be, not this exact example, but similar examples are going to be legal probably in a matter of months in certain places. And this is not the hill to die on if you're the NCAA. Like, this is not something that was done for a competitive advantage. This is not something that was institutionally sanctioned in any way. Like, it just, you opened the report not knowing quite what you were going to see, and you kind of got partway through, and it was just like, okay, I see. There's really not much anything here that is of any direct concern to the Ohio State football program in terms of potential sanctions or anything like that. So, yeah, I think this seems like being kind of proactive, trying to get ahead of the story, trying to be responsible and address the issue and make sure, that there's no question of a cover up or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, can we talk about the Oregon game time now?
Well, one more thing, Tom, and then I'll get and just Gene Smith was again commended Ryan Day for the culture that he has created to where the players were so open in this investigation because it's not a subject that a lot of them would want to talk about. And so the fact that they were open enough to do that, he was happy about that. And I'm sure the investigators were as well. So he also mentioned like, because the players are so like, these are good kids, they're also open to being subjected to stuff like this because maybe they're just a little too naive. But now they will certainly have learned from this, and the hope is that other programs will as well. And so, yes, as all of this was coming down, you or I guess then the kickoff time and game time and network was dropped for the Ohio State Oregon game, Tom. So, what, when, where, and how?
Well, the Ohio State Oregon game, as you know, is scheduled for September 11th, this Saturday. And unsurprisingly, that is going to be one of the biggest games of the year. So Fox is going to be very, very interested in broadcasting that game. Fox has, in fact, grabbed that game. That's one of the weeks that they've taken, I think, taken the first pick. So they have picked the Ohio State Oregon game. And with it being 9/11 and the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, they have a Mets-Yankees game on in primetime that night. So the Ohio State Oregon game will be the big noon kickoff on Saturday, September 11th on Fox. There was some immediate griping and grousing on our Ask the Insiders board about that news and, people who don't care for noon kickoffs. But Fox at this point, I mean, they have had a lot of success with kind of zigging when everyone else is zagging. Everyone else was kind of racing to prime time, and you'd have, a big game on ABC and a big game on, CBS would have a big primetime game sometimes. And it was like, why would you be, try and fight for a third of the country when all of the SEC is watching one part of the country and all of the Pac-12 is watching a different part of the country? Why would you try and fight for that? Go just own noon. They've found a ton of success there. They've picked up some very, very big rating numbers, especially with Ohio State. So you're just going to have to make your peace with the fact that there are going to be some noon kickoffs for big games for Ohio State quite often, as long as they're televised on Fox. So this is going to be one of those.
It's like people forget that this is a thing. Like every year with the spring game, like no tackling. What are you talking about? It's like, well, that was the same thing last year as well. And well, big noon is this the fourth year for the big noon?
It was at least the third. 2019 was the Penn State game was a noon game. I'm trying to think back if there were noon games, like big games in 2018. I don't think so.
So this will be, I know it's at least the third. And,
it's at least the third year. And yeah, and just make your peace with it. Like there are going to be, the way the TV contracts work, Fox and ABC/ESPN basically get to divide up the weeks. So 1 week, Fox picks every year. They're probably going to they get the first pick because they pay an extra $1 million a year. Every year, they're probably going to pick Ohio State, Michigan week, and that is always going to be a noon game, and it's always going to be on Fox at this point. ABC, ESPN will get their second choice of a week. They will probably pick, I'm going to guess that's probably going to be Ohio State, Penn State week this year will be an ABC, ESPN game. And then Fox gets the third pick, and they pick the Ohio State, Oregon week, because here's a little secret. Ohio State's the only team in the Big Ten that like everyone in the country will turn on the TV and watch. So those if that is true, I don't know exactly the order that those weeks got picked, but my guess would be Ohio State, Michigan first. That's going to be a noon game. Ohio State, Penn State, ABC, ESPN picked that. That's going to be this, probably a 3:30 or a night game, and then Ohio State, Oregon will be a noon game on Fox.
Yeah, as soon as you told me that it's the Fox noon game, that to me seemed like the third pick. That was the third overall draft pick that week because it's always the Michigan week, and then I'd have to look to see what those weeks look like, what they all entail. But yeah, that sure seems like the third pick. In a way, Oregon, I think they're showing up in the top 10 in the preseason polls. So I don't know. There's some interest there. And are you not going to watch because it's too early? Like I like, of course, Tom, we are not the right demographic for this in that we're working the game. So the sooner I'm home, the more football I can watch afterwards, so there is that. And I appreciate that. And, being at the stadium until 2:00 in the morning or 3:00 in the morning and getting home. And then, while that is not the perspective that anybody else that listening really cares about, I like the noon games personally.
And, even when I wasn't watching, when I wasn't covering the games, if I was just sitting at home and watching, like, a few years out of college, you'd spend all day thinking about like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen in the Ohio State game tonight. And then you're not, you're thinking about that. You're not, if the team that you're rooting for has won its game already, like, okay, good. You get to just watch you get to watch the 2 highlights during every halftime show after that. You don't have to think about that. You can just focus on watching the other games, enjoying the other games. If you have people over that night to hang out, like, you can just talk to them and you can just kind of like passively watch whatever the game is, and you're not completely sucked into the game. So yeah, you're going to have to get used to it. Like, this is the way the world works now. Fox is paying them more money than you are, so they get a vote and you don't. So this is how college sports works right now.
Well, and then you always have with Fox in the World Series, how those are primetime games in the fall as well. So they're trying to kind of get their cake and eat it too with the noon games. And I agree with you. You split up the primetime, the bigger piece of the pie when you are the big show, the big noon game. You're competing against Vanderbilt versus Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. The old Jefferson Pilot slot.
and Kansas against, Oklahoma State with their 11 o'clock kickoff. And it leads to bigger ratings and just more eyes. And then it becomes, that's what you're known for. That's yours now. Just like CBS still has the SEC for a couple more years, one more year.
Yeah, I know that deal is gone, and I don't remember when ESPN bought it out. I don't know if they bought it out early or not, but it's coming to an end if it
like the 3:30 CBS spot, that's SEC, and sometimes on special weeks there'd be a night game as well, and so you just become known for that. And I mean, they put the label on it, so they definitely want to be known for it. And just get used to it, and feel free to complain though. That's fine.
Well, and here's another benefit. You framed it around the World Series, that Fox is going to have the World Series, so that's going to push some of these games to noon. Okay, you know what baseball fans all complain about? Every baseball fan complains about? The World Series is on at night. My kids can't stay up and watch. Why are you putting on the World Series on in prime time? My kids can watch the first 2 innings, and then they have to go to bed, and they're not building a love for the sport of baseball because they can't watch the World Series. Okay, congratulations. Guess what that means? Your kid can watch the whole Ohio State-Oregon game. Not a problem. They can watch the entire Ohio State-Michigan game. Not a problem. Big Ten championship game is going to be on noon today. Guess what? Your kid can watch the whole darn thing. Like, this is fine. Like, there are pluses and minuses to everything. And yes, I'm sure like your tailgate party would be more fun, or you would be, the shoe would be a little rowdier for an 8 o'clock kickoff than it would for a noon kickoff or whatever. But like, there are pluses and minuses here. And if you're going to complain about the World Series being played at night and kids can't watch, well, okay, then you should be completely okay with the noon kickoff, because then your kids can watch.
Like, even in my younger days, although there weren't a lot of night games in my younger days, but just the wait just takes forever. And, what's the wait for a noon game? You wake up at 11:30, crack open a beer, and boom, it's kickoff. I mean, that's great. And then you just...
Hey, save it for the show when we talk about how you cover games.
Oh, crap, 11:30. Well, I better head to the stadium. No, that was actually last year when I didn't have to go to the stadium. Just wake up at 11:30 and go. So that's cool. I wonder, this is the time of year where stuff starts to trickle out in terms of kickoffs, but this feels a little earlier than normal to me. I don't know if it is or not.
Well, this was Colin Cowherd had some Fox executive on his radio show at some point today, and that's where it came out. So, I think they have generally started releasing this stuff earlier and earlier because, it's not like they're going to change their mind on that game. Like, that's week 2. So they probably already know who's got week 1, and whoever has week 1 already knows what time they're going to put on whatever the premier game of that week is. Well, this is week 2. This is the premier game. Fox knows it. They know what they're going to do with it. They're going to do it the same thing with it every year. So go ahead and announce it now. I mean, I don't see any reason not to. But, I mean, it's not like people are going to be any more or less hyped now than they would be 2-3 weeks from now. So, if you know it, go ahead and put it out. And then, hey, you want to look at a positive that helps everyone make their travel plans. Like, you now know, like, hey, if I'm coming in from out of town, I need to get a hotel Friday night, not necessarily Saturday night. So there you go. You're welcome. Well, sorry, you need 2-night minimum. Sorry. You need both.
So I wonder if because Washington and Michigan is that same weekend, I wonder if that puts the Big House in prime time.
Do you need me to explain to you why that's not the biggest game of the week? I can do that if you can, if you'd like. Yes, no, you're probably right, because that probably is the second pick then.
Like ABC or ESPN.
The ABC. I mean, I don't know what else is on that week, but yeah, that'll be the ABC or ESPN game on at 3:30 or at 7:00 or whatever, or I guess 8:00 for ABC.
And that's another reason. Buckeye fans, you can watch the Oregon game, and then you have all night to watch the Michigan game. I mean, that's a full day for Buckeye fans. You watch Ohio State win, then you get to watch Michigan lose. Like, what's better? Like, how could you not look forward to that? Let me see what else is going on week 2. Toledo at Notre Dame, Stanford at USC, Texas at Arkansas.
Stanford at USC. Stanford at USC seems like it has some real strong, like, FS1 9:00 p.m. vibes, like real strong. And by the way, here's another thing that Ohio State fans should be happy about. You know what time Oregon players' bodies is going to be saying it is at kickoff of that game? 9 a.m. So I don't know how early they're getting out, and I'm sure they'll practice at 9 a.m. every day that week or for multiple weeks before that. But yeah, that's teams going West Coast to East Coast. That's always a body clock game that will you see teams coming out of the chute kind of slow.
What will the body clocks of the Mercer players be when they hit Alabama that same week?
I'm not sure. I think they might be in the same time zone. I'm not 100% sure where Mercer is. I feel like it's somewhere in the sort of southeast, I think, but I couldn't tell you for sure. They're the Bears. I know that, but I don't know where they're located. Yeah, I don't think body clocks will be the main issue there for Mercer on that day. That's again, without knowing for sure where they are. That's just my speculation.
Thank you. Iowa State could be the 3:30 Fox game, maybe. But yeah, that's about the biggest bunch of games. So I'm looking forward to this season. I don't know if anybody else is, but I am. Tom, let's talk about the transfer portal, where the Buckeyes had another player enter, Tyreke Johnson, 4th-year defensive back, cornerback, who I don't think surprised anybody. I think the surprise at this point was that it took this long and that it didn't happen maybe after last season, but he gave it the old college try one more spring. And for me, all I needed, like, once DeMario McCall was playing in front of him in the spring game, that was all. Not that you needed any more writing on the wall for this guy. And it just, there's been a lot of corners that have come through here, and he's never been able to make his way up and play when Buckeyes were thin. And so when you see DeMario McCall, who had been playing corner for, I don't know, all of 2 or 3 weeks, repping in front of him during the spring game, boy, that's big, bold lettering on the wall.
Yeah, and not just DeMario McCall repping in front of him, but also Sevyn Banks wasn't playing in the spring game. Cam Brown wasn't playing in the spring game. Those are your 2 projected starting corners. So if you're not really, like, very clearly the number 1 guy at that point, like, all right, well, if you've got multiple younger guys potentially ahead of you, and you have DeMario McCall, who's been playing the position for all of 3 weeks ahead of you, like, okay, that's like when it just, like, this may just not happen for you here. And, he's an interesting case because he came in as a 5-star guy. He was one of 3 5-star guys in that 2018 class, Urban Meyer's last class. And, it seemed, you come in with that 5-star hype and everyone thinks, oh, this guy's gonna be on the field right away. And it didn't happen the first year. I'm just kind of like, okay, well, sometimes it takes a while to get in the rotation. And then it didn't happen the second year. And I'm pretty sure he was the featured photo that I used on the article that I wrote in the spring of 2020 on guys who this is a really big spring for this guy. And they obviously didn't have a spring last year, and he went through last season and wasn't really in the rotation at all. And, then you get into this spring and it's like, okay, so this is clearly just not going to happen. Like this is, and, sometimes you'll have guys who are in that spot who will just choose to finish their degree and, stick it out and go through the whole thing. Did he graduate? I think he might have just graduated. I feel like I might have
he's listed as
I might have seen him on that list of graduates, but
on the roster it just says senior, junior. So
okay. Yeah. But, sometimes you'll have those guys who will choose to stick it out for, their whole careers and just, not, prioritize stuff over playing time. He's going to go somewhere else. And he's someone who, for a group of 5 program or something like that, like say he goes to South Florida, Central Florida, something like that, he could be an impact guy there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And somebody on the Ask the Insiders board asked, like, well, why wasn't he ever moved to safety? And I explained what Kerry Combs has said in the past, in that if you can play corner, they start you out at corner, and then as you can't play it, they kind of move you to safety. And the fact that he really never moved from corner just tells me that they didn't think he really could do what they needed at safety. Because even going back to Jordan Fuller started out at corner for about a day. Christian Bryant started out at corner and he moved pretty quickly. And it's just an odd case that he never moved. But again, they're thin at corner. And so he had experience certainly practicing and played a little bit. So they had so few corners last year that to move even a guy that doesn't really play is going to put you in a bad situation, because if he did at least have to play at some point, then he's at least somewhat experienced in the teachings and what they ask for. And then so if he had moved off to safety and then you got to bring him back, now you're going to be in even bigger trouble. So yeah, I just never worked out for him. 5-star, like, safety, maybe the number 1 safety in the class at one point, or number 2 or 3, something like that.
Yeah, he was the number 2 safety. He was a number 21 overall player, number 2 safety, number 5 player in the state of Florida. He's just, you look at the 5-stars in that class, and it's just very interesting because you got the top 4 ranked players in that class. They were all top 30 guys. Nick Petit-Frere, ranked number 7, 5-star offensive lineman, took a couple of years to get his footing and find his spot. He was fantastic last year. He should be solid again this year, and then boom, off to the NFL. That's like how you would sort of expect it to go. Teron Vincent has had some injury issues, but has, got on the field as a freshman, was in that rotation as a freshman, which was impressive. Missed a year, came back last year, was okay last year. You would assume he'll probably be pretty good this year, and then presumably off to the NFL. Then you got Tyreke Johnson, who we just talked about, and you got Jalen Gill, who was, one of those guys who he was a little bit of a DeMario McCall, where he never quite found his role in the Ohio State offense. There was never, he came in with the, like, this guy would be a perfect slot receiver. And it just, like, that wasn't really what that slot receiver, he just didn't fit that slot receiver mold quite right. And had the fumble against Indiana in 2019, right when it was like, okay, hey, this is your opportunity to maybe, make a move and show people what you got. And he had, you turn the ball over, and that'll get you in the doghouse real quick. And had, I think he scored 1 career touchdown. He scored a touchdown against Rutgers that everyone was really happy for him. It was good for him that he's, scored his first career touchdown, and then ended up transferring to Boston College before last season. So, there is a high correlation between recruiting rankings and on-field success, but it is not a one-to-one correlation for sure.
No, and you look further down that list, and you've got Brian Snead, the number 80 player in the nation. I mean, there's you just never know. And then, of course, the third from the bottom guy, Chris Olave, in that class. He's a senior receiver, not good enough to go pro last year. So maybe this year, maybe he'll be able to work it out this year. We'll see. I don't know.
That whole class is fascinating. We just went to the top 4. Number 5, Tyreke Smith, very good player. He's should be probably off to the NFL after this year. Jeremy Ruckert, same thing. Taraja Mitchell finally getting a chance to play. Tommy Togiai just got drafted. Matthew Jones played big moments last year, but fighting for a starting job this year. Josh Proctor, multi-year starter. Cam Babb has had the catastrophic injury issues and just can't buy a break. Brian Snead, who was at Ohio State exceptionally briefly and then was playing for Eastern Kentucky, I believe, last year. Max Ray just transferred to Colorado. Tyler Friday has been a rotation player for them. LaChristian Smith transferred to Cincinnati, Dallas Gant, very much in that Taraja Mitchell role. Antoine Jackson has been, he was relatively low on this list, and he's been one of the more regular contributors of all these guys. So you're going through a lot of guys who have played less than Antoine Jackson. Kayvon Pope, kind of in that same role as Mitchell and Gant. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, very similar to Friday. Seven Banks, one of the best of these guys. Master Teague, again, very, very, he's been a big, consistent contributor. Cam Brown was a starting corner. And at the bottom of the list, it's Matthew Baldwin, who I don't think he ever took a snap on the field at Ohio State because of a knee injury. I think he missed his whole first year and then transferred. And then Chris Olave, who you mentioned, who people may know. Alex Williams, who transferred to Vanderbilt. And Marcus Hooker, who I believe is still suspended and, played, but that's just a very interesting class because it's like, this is the entire spectrum of possible results you could have from as a college football recruit, all contained in one class.
And still guys with the potential to do way much more. Mm-hmm. If that's an actual phrase.
That is now.
Way
Sorry about
much
that.
more. Like Taraja Mitchell and Dallas Gant and those guys, and even Josh Proctor, who could be the key to the entire defense. Tom, anything else before we get out of here? Is there anything that we left unsaid?
Well, there's lots we left unsaid, but nothing we're going to say. So I think we're done.
Yes. And again, check out BuckeyeScoop.com if you want to read the story of the release of the investigation. The entire documentation is also attached to the story, and it's linked there, including letters from OSU, letters from Gene Smith telling the massage therapist, you are no longer permitted on campus. You are no longer permitted to access to our players. And again, all of the findings from the investigation is there as well. If you're interested in talking about it on the Ask the Insiders board, you got to be a member, which I would also recommend you become if you are not yet. So that will do it for today. We will be back on Tuesday to talk about who knows what, and we will see you then.